I'm Hannah Benson, and you're listening to All Things ESL, a podcast for ESL professionals. This time, we're talking about teacher burnout. And if you say that you've never dealt with anything of the sort, well, you would be lying, wouldn't you? My first year of teaching, I stopped drinking water. I didn't have time to go to the bathroom because my students didn't have the language to ask where the bathroom was in between bells. My dentist had me taking a special mouthwash for dry mouth. And I would finish at 10 o'clock at night and start over the next day at 6 so I could get to school on time to make copies. On LA School Report, Ellie Herman quit teaching because of the copy machine. After 5 years of teaching, it was the copier that did her in. There are so many things that can cause teacher burnout for ESL teachers. It is a special combination of lack of materials, lack of support, lack of mentorship, lack of administrative support, or taking on student life burdens. This bubbling cauldron of negativity can be hard to overcome. And one of the things I love talking with teachers for this podcast is meeting people who've overcome these burdens and still genuinely love being a teacher. I wanted to step back and look at burnout as a whole and see if some high-stress jobs have ways of coping that education just hasn't evolved enough yet to incorporate. I interviewed psychologists and therapists, insurance adjusters, and doctors. Here's one.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Joy Walton, and I am a physician from Columbus, Ohio.
Joy has 3 kids, and you can hear them randomly in the background.
I work part-time, and I kind of live in 2 worlds. I do internal medicine, and that part of my world is hospitalized adult patients. And then I am also a pediatrician, and I take care of mostly kiddos with special needs. And I do that both in an outpatient and inpatient setting.
I've heard just from what you said, how many choices you made. I mean, as a mom going in part-time and making sure you've got that family time because that's something you're passionate about. And then going into the particular fields that you're interested in and seeing that that will work for your schedule, that works best for your work life and your home life. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of teachers make is that we just think, okay, there's one aspect of teaching and I want to be a teacher. I don't really... there's not a whole lot of introspection, and I feel like you have a really good grasp on that. Did that take a while?
So, great question. Yeah, it's something that I had chosen early on, even I think in my medical school years, knowing that have a sense of work-life balance and that would be difficult to do in the culture of medicine. So that hasn't been difficult. Yes, I get pressure from medical directors on both sides, on internal medicine and pediatrics, to pick up this shift, or can you be on this committee? Can you do this thing? Can you cover for me here because you're working part time, so you must have a lot of extra time, right? So,
okay, let's be honest. How many of us chose where we wanted to work, the number of hours, which nationalities we wanted to work with, or age group? There's so little introspection that goes into being a teacher initially. I was stunned at Dr. Walton's thoroughness, and she said it took a while to get a good grasp on the direction she wanted to take, but because of who she is, it took even longer for her to be firm about it.
The first day of medical school, they had the day taking a Myers-Briggs personality test.
Joy says finding out that being a helper and a giver made her realize something about herself early on.
But what that really has helped me now, that as I've been kind of deeper in my career, is that I have to be careful. That's already my tendency is to want to be helpful and want to be useful. Otherwise, I don't feel like anybody wants me there. That I can definitely burn out. I tend to overextend myself. I can't say no, and there's no boundaries, and I can get to a really unhealthy place where I build up resentment, and that has been very, very revealing for me, Hannah, and it's helped me really kind of make wiser choices instead of automatically every time my medical director wants me to do something, I sign up first.
Recognizing your personal tendencies for burnout is really important. Another doctor I talked to said it helped her to look at her patients as in the middle of their story, in the middle of their diagnosis. So what you're seeing is a small part of the picture. And I think that's really helpful as an ESL teacher to look look at these students who have some of them horrible traumatic pasts and see that this is only one piece of their entire life. And you're catching them at a pivotal moment. And this is a positive situation because you have the opportunity to be helpful.
You have to be able to capture and hold on to those quiet moments of joy where you do throughout your stressful day get a kiddo who who knows you by name and wants to just give you the biggest hug, or have a conversation that was fruitful and led to a diagnostic and therapeutic plan that was really the best thing for that patient.
Now, I don't know how many of us come out of a SPED meeting going, yes, that was awesome, we have a plan. But there is something to be said for those small victories during your day and keeping focus on the wins that you have.
And, I'm not like I'm not a really super touchy-feely person. Like, a lot of things sound hokey to me. And so I was skeptical about this at first, but I was getting some coaching through the Enneagram. And my coach suggested this to me, and I thought it was really, really helpful. My morning mantra is this, and this has a lot to do going back to my motivations, my personality, my tendencies. And for me, it's very, very integrated into my faith. In my mind as I'm laying there. I am forgiven and redeemed. I have been chosen and adopted. I stand unconditionally loved and accepted. In him, there is no striving, only resting. And I say that, or some version of that, and then I start my day. And it has been one of the most helpful things, just in centering my day, just to know that, there is no striving in what I'm doing. There's resting. And I get to do this every day. I get to, this is a privilege. And so it's been really, really helpful.
It sounds like even the most stressful jobs do not have a class about how to handle stress. So a lot of teachers enter the field without any idea how to handle what's coming. I remember a 20-minute talk from a school district lawyer warning my graduating class to avoid teacher gossip like the plague. It can get you fired. And that was about it in terms of warnings. In fact, the majority of teachers have a completely false perception of the students they'll be working with. Sandy McClary from NYU discovered about how rare that ideal student is, the one with the perfect combination of being both industrious and reactive, is only about 20% of all students. After 10 years of experience, I thought that number was pretty high. But the reality is that teachers coming into the field tend to think that it's the opposite, that 80% of the class will be highly motivated and 20% of the class will not be. My assumption upon coming into ESL was, why on earth would I have to sell English to these students when I know they need what I'm selling? Regardless, I was terribly disappointed in the lack of student motivation when I entered my first teaching position. Another issue that can lead to burnout, as we discovered in the last episode, is administration's hands-off attitude when it came to reinforcing ESL differentiation in the mainstream classroom. In the last episode, we met Eva Grauslis, who discovered the pushback at her first job in a small district. She could have stopped teaching there. But Eva's mentality about teaching has broadened, and now she works with a new mission. Not only does she teach, but she creates materials aimed at supporting new teachers. And perhaps this is the challenge to avoiding burnout, finding a higher calling or a side hustle that helps you feel like you're doing more than just standing in line at a copy machine forever. An upcoming All Things ESL episode will feature many teachers who've gone on to expand their profession, to reach out beyond the limitations of the classroom. If you would like to be a part of that episode, please contact me on my website. Fortunately, there is a difference between burnout and demoralization. Dr. Doris Santoro wrote a book entitled Demoralized: Why Teachers Leave the Profession They Love and How They Can Stay. Dr. Santoro wasn't available for interview, but in a previous interview, she said demoralization is when teachers reach a point they say, I can't teach the way I know I'm supposed to be teaching. The profession has changed. She says demoralization wasn't that the teacher hated the act of teaching. It was that these people were simply lacking what Dr. Santoro called moral rewards, like the hope we had in using our creativity to run our classrooms how we like. She says a teacher starts a burnout narrative that says, I blew it, I couldn't hack it, can't preserve myself. And she says with burnout, there's nothing left. There's no possibility for revival of sorts. But if you are demoralized, the game isn't over. Dr. Santoro interviewed teachers around the country and found that this feeling is not only for teachers in low-income areas, but instead demoralization is found across the board. Part of the problem was administration issues, being told they were doing it wrong after spending an immense amount of time on lesson plans and being told how they need to be teaching. But a second issue was technology. There was not a pushback by demoralized teachers to use technology. Instead, it was the ridiculous hoops a teacher is forced into to use complicated technology to record grades, communicate with families, and the time wasted entering data.
My name's Justin. I'm an Esl Resource Teacher in Hillsborough County, which, it's a diverse group because there's a lot of Cuban influence here, like historically, like even from over 100 years ago.
Justin is an ESL Resource Teacher, and I had to ask him what that was exactly.
Kind of like a hybrid in the sense that you're supporting other teachers, you're providing them as many resources as you can, you're networking with them to try to give them strategies, ideas. At the elementary level here, anyway, it's more of a pull-out scenario. We definitely do a lot of testing and assessment for these students. And then also in my role, I feel compelled to be almost like a social worker in the sense of trying to work with the families and welcoming families from, various parts of around the world, primarily Puerto Rico and Central America at this point.
Oh my goodness. I just wish that this job title was everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've literally never heard of someone doing what you do. And I'm psyched about it.
Yeah.
Because I've been talking to psychologists and social workers for this episode. And I said, is there anybody that teachers can talk to? Bond or even, a resource person like you would just take so much of the load off to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody. And she said, there's somebody called a dean of teachers. As like the go-to person for any teacher that is close to being burnt out. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a private school thing.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
But this is not the job that you did when you were talking about getting burnt out, right?
So my first 6 years full-time in education were in a private school in the Tampa area. I was teaching world history. We explored a lot of issues within the realm of like justice and equity, believe it or not, in private school, and talking about immigration, discussing things like genocide, like totalitarianism.
Justin said he enjoyed the topics he was teaching and found it personally stimulating, but the stress of his work started to grate on him.
You would think it being in a private school, it would be like not maybe as rigid, but there were maybe expectations put on teachers to do things for kids that I felt I personally was feeling overwhelmed by, whether it was just like, updating grades every day or giving assessments all the time, which is kind of the, opposite of what people say about public schools. They think, maybe private schools, you shouldn't test as much, but it's still that performance mentality. Expectation on the kids that I was working with in many cases was to live up to an expectation that their parents had already set out for them and to get ahead of the curve, from a very young age. So there was a lot of pressure within that. And some of it may even be from a business standpoint, just trying to produce the results.
Okay. So you're saying your students were pretty motivated at this school that you were working at?
Yes.
Okay. And you still got burnt out? I'm not judging.
No.
That's a really interesting because usually that's one of the aspects of burnout.
I think what it is a social issue. We live in a society where you value busyness. We value performance. I even saw children that were overwhelmed by their expectations in terms of academics, or they would have anxiety if they even got close to getting a B or something like that.
Justin said the constant pressure to perform drug him down. And then, as is what usually happens, one final straw was placed on the stack.
I would like this major project was put on us in the private school world to take part in like a history day type activity or something. And so it was like a project that consumed like 2/3 of my year. So I just threw out like 2/3.
Oh my gosh.
And
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh because this is a really stressful time for you, but like, what were they thinking?
Yeah, and they the principal that did that ended up like resigning over some issues and things like that.
Oh my goodness.
So that kind of threw a wrench into the system as well. But I had some friends and some great people kind of like lead me to getting help, even professional help, which I thought there were a lot of stigmas around. And like either I do this or I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. So I just decided to quit with no prospects whatsoever.
My laughing interrupted what Justin was trying to say about how this school project that was meant to encourage education and interest in history forced Justin to throw out 2/3 of the curriculum he had planned. And this goes back to those moral rewards that Dr. Santoro was talking about. The teachers just can't feel job satisfaction if what they have worked so hard on is being thrown out in favor for something that has administrative approval. She says part of the problem of this communication failure between teachers and administration is the language of feedback. So when a teacher says, "I can't be creative anymore," what she may mean is there's so little flexibility with required curriculum, I just can't connect the lesson to topics that students are interested in. So regardless, there is a growing epidemic. So 15% of teachers leave after the first year. Even more stunning is the 41% of teachers that leave after their 5th year, reports Psychology Today.
What kind of people, what life stories trigger me, and why do they do that?
This is Johanna Ruder. She's an occupational therapist for parents and students in Örebro, Sweden. She tells me in her halting, intentional lilt that it's important to recognize what exactly it is that might be affecting you so strongly as a person. Justin told me he had always been a BC student and that had been good enough for him. And it frustrated him that the community at that school demanded more of everyone.
But I didn't know personally how to deal with my stress or my anxiety. I didn't even really know how much like stress or anxiety I had.
So even though the students were motivated and the teachers were motivated and the administration was motivated, it was too much. It was a hamster wheel of stress, and Justin needed out. And it was actually ESL that helped him find his passion in teaching again.
I just felt like this powerful pull in me that was saying, what about the kids you're teaching about? What about the kids that that are in the lessons? You know, people who are fleeing totalitarianism or genocide or war, anything like that.
I think all of us would agree that we got into this profession because we care about these people, caught in one of the most defining moments of their lives. And oh, by the way, you have to carry on with puberty too. But then we teachers get bogged down with blurred boundaries.
People out there who find our jobs because we want to work with people because we care. And then it's hard to find those kind of emotional boundaries that are necessary to keep us from maybe getting burnt out or in the end looking for new professions because it's just too much to deal with.
There are many stresses within being a teacher, but among all these factors, as we heard with Dr. Walton, it is important to be intentional with your choices of which factors not only can you handle, but will also feed into your passions and therefore give you energy.
I do love my job. I think it's the right place for me to be right now. I can do so much in the classroom. I think education is one of the number one pathways to really affecting social change.
In this scenario, Justin loved teaching about successes of people internationally overcoming hard times in his history teaching position, but did not love the pressure of academic perfection that the school strived for. To continue his career in teaching, he made some trades. After volunteering, he now teaches ESL students who are those people from all over the world living real-life success stories in modern hard times. And he's teaching them in a school system with a care for a longer timeline for academic success.
within my profession, one thing we talk about is kind of just like the pragmatic need to be able to keep working if I'm to keep helping families.
In fact, it's looking at the situation pragmatically that can help you get in better touch with who you are as a teacher, to make sure you are being the best educator you can be. If you don't like students, that's one thing. But if you don't like kids, perhaps you'd be best suited in the high school. It's time for some soul searching, time to figure out what would help you revive your passion in teaching again. And a lot of you are saying, yeah, a conversation like that with my administrator would go over like an anvil on a rainbow. I don't know. I just made that up. But if you're feeling so burnt out because you think taking on all that's being dumped on you is what it takes to be a team player, might I suggest a conversation that goes like this? Here are my talents. I want to be great for you. How can I best use these talents to do great things at this school? And this turns the conversation from being, you're not giving me what I need, to here is who I am. Let's do this.
I think the only recourse is to try to develop a base of stakeholders in some cases outside of the school, whether that's parents or nonprofit or community organizations.
Justin suggested getting a sort of booster club together. Molly Overstein Allen says there are different options. She wrote an article on jimmyesl.com, and it was so insightful, I had to call her up and say congratulations. One thing that really pressed upon me while I was talking to Molly is that she kept bringing up activities that fed back into her energy. And if you know me, I mean, hey, we're on the 4th episode, we're getting pretty tight, right? I don't usually spend a lot of time thinking about what gives me good headspace. So, the fact that this kept coming up in our conversation led me to think maybe there's something here. But I will be the first to admit I'm terrible at leaving work stress at work. And just like Molly said, there are symptoms that we need to recognize before we are getting demoralized. Molly described her sense of dread, and Johanna has another symptom.
When you kind of notice that someone is popping up in your dreams and popping up in a lot of your conversations at home, to take some time with your colleague. We kind of coach each other in that of, all right, I'm not sure what it is. Can we talk about why this person's case is just really coming home with me?
Next time on All Things ESL, we're talking about ESL parent-teacher conferences. If you have a story you'd like to share, please email me at marvelousenl@gmail.com or on my Facebook page at All Things ESL Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Hannah Benson.
I had a quote from Brene Brown that I wrote down. It takes courage to say yes to rest and play in a culture where exhaustion is seen as a status symbol.